Overcoming Fear is the title of my message today. You may have heard of the company No Fear, and it was created in 1989, and it began as an alternative lifestyle brand. The first line of No Fear shirts featured slogans or quotes that advocated the virtues of extreme sports. The themes were lack of fear of death, lack of laziness, contempt for social norms, and the law. It was quite popular in the 90s, especially when it came to sports, and they also made an energy drink with that label. And I remember having a No Fear sticker pasted on my wall in my room so I could look at that every morning when I woke up. But I also remember being sponsored by this company on my high school volleyball team, and that was a theme, that we wouldn't fear any of our competitors, but also that we wouldn't fear ourselves, but rather overcome it. And we had our coach to thank for that, for he also had played for a reputable college known for their volleyball sports program, and he obviously had good connections since we were sponsored by No Fear. Our practices were intense. For example, there was one exercise where we could not let the ball hit the ground no matter what. So he would have us lay down on the ground, and he would spike that ball at us, making sure that that ball wouldn't hit the ground. So we had to overcome the fear of getting hit. Yes, we got hit in the head, we got hit everywhere, but that's what you do, because you're getting spikes when playing in a game that are very quick, and you better be quick on your reflexes. So that was one of the exercises. And then we had serving drills, and if we missed a serve, we'd have to do 20 push-ups. And then you serve right after that. So if you're already weak after doing push-ups, you better make sure you make the next one. And every time the ball hit the floor during a game, we would have to dive for it no matter what, even if the play is over. He wanted us to practice diving or practice trying to get that ball. It may have seemed unorthodox to everybody watching, but it was actually kind of exciting too, because it got the crowd into it as well, wondering, so what are they doing? But losing a game is something that the coach did not like, because even after we lost the game, we would have practice right afterwards in the gym. While people are still there in the stands leaving, we would have practice. Those of us who were on the bench wouldn't just sit there and watch the game, because when the ball hit the floor, what did we do? We would run off the bench and we would dive for that ball to show our teammates just how to do it. We were always involved. We were always part of the game. We were unified as a team. And with this mindset, we made it to the playoffs and to the CIF, which is the California Interscholastic Federations. We made it to the championships, but we had lost that game in a third set. And that is the farthest at that time the school has ever gone when it came to volleyball. And it was a privilege to play for that team in that year. Now, fear is a hot topic on the minds of many in regards to what is presently happening all around the world. We have been sharing this information, something we have been doing since our church existence, on what is going on in the world, as this is also a command from God and a commission for us in the church to be proclaiming this information, which goes hand in hand with what the Bible is saying, and it's based on biblical prophecy. And this virus pandemic, which we are going through, most certainly falls under that category. And look what this has led to. Fear. If you don't believe that, look at the news, look at social media, and you tell me that what you hear isn't generated with fear. There's confusion in all corners of what to do. This person says do this person says don't do that, back and forth. Who can you trust when you hear something like that? Just today, the Wall Street Journal puts out an article saying that California is the first state to pass 500,000 infections. But nowhere in the article does it say how many people have recovered. Doesn't even mention it. I turn on the local news and what I hear is a number of new cases. But what I don't hear is how many end up negative, how many have recovered, etc. Now, I'm not undermining this saying Well, I'm not undermining this at all, saying that the virus doesn't exist. But to go through these drastic measures, instilling fear upon everyone by shutting down the country and the whole world with these extreme guidelines to try to eliminate a virus? Can't eliminate a virus. Everything is so inconsistent. How can you? The social distancing of 6 feet. I mean, we've heard that over and over again. Why 6 feet? 5.5 feet is not enough. Limiting gatherings, especially focusing on family gatherings. Nope, that is a result from a spike increase. Churches, spike increase. But of course you hear about things, and I'm sure you've heard that too, they won't even dare talk about protesting, right? As being a reason for spike increases. Or whatever, I mean the whole debate on masks on and off. I'm just sharing with you what is going on out there. The question is, do you feel safe in a mask? Do you feel safe when you're vaccinated? And if someone else isn't, why are you so worried if you're vaccinated, right? These are the kind of questions that you have to ask each other, ask ourselves. Is that really necessary? Why haven't we done these things before when we had the H1N1 flu and we had the flu in general, when we had West Nile virus? I know these are the questions that we have asked before. Why wasn't it done then? If it wasn't for social media, we wouldn't be in this situation. Even when I went to a doctor's office, I had to go 2 or 3 times, and I'm sure a lot of you have already done that too. I had to go to urgent care, and this was exactly during the time when the spike increases, or supposedly there were spike increases in that city. And so I go there. I haven't even seen urgent care so empty before, at least when I went. And then I asked, well, has there been a lot of cases, people coming in here for this? Like, none, hardly at all. What happened to these supposed spike increases? Now, I'm not saying that there weren't any, but I'm just saying at that time when I went, that wasn't the case. Those of us who bank on flying to the place of safety, I mean, we see what's been happening now when it comes to airlines, right? What do we think now? When there are travel bans all around the world for something like this. And we haven't even scratched the surface of how things are going to get in the future. If we are fearful now, and we try to handle things with what we feel is right in our own eyes, while at the same time neglecting what God commands us to do, then we are in serious trouble with what the near future holds. God commands us to keep the feast with joy, not at home, not in isolation, but together with brethren in unity, with like minds, and always despite what is happening in the world. And do you not think that God doesn't know what's going on? He says this for a reason. If we look at Deuteronomy 16, verses 13 to 16, we see what God commands. And this is something we're going to be touching upon anyway as the feast approaches. But this is the very next thing that's coming up. Deuteronomy 16 and verse 13. This is what God says. You shall observe the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days, when you have gathered from your threshing floor and from your winepress. And you shall rejoice in your feast, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, and the Levite, the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are within your gates. 7 days you shall keep a sacred feast to the Lord your God in the place which the Lord chooses, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and in the work of your hands, so that you surely rejoice. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God in the place which he chooses, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Now, obviously, if you can't truly observe the feast due to illness because you are physically unable to travel, that is understandable. But here's something interesting. This year, God has chosen Rapid City, South Dakota, as his feast site here in the States when it comes to our church, Church of Eternal God. That is our feast site here in the United States. And this is one of the very few states that have the lowest cases and the lowest guidelines. Tell me that this wasn't inspired Because for many years we've been keeping the feast in areas where, like Pismo Beach, California, for example. California is a hot state right now with cases and guidelines and all that, which would have made it very difficult to keep the feast in the way we want to. Again, you don't think God knows what's going on? That he can't protect us? That he can't miraculously intervene? What he also does is test our faith and our belief and our loyalty to him, that what he says will happen. And we have been saying this for many, many years, that things will get bad and very quickly. But did we believe it? We have even stated that this year was going to be a very interesting year, right when the year started, before we even knew what was going to happen. I know this because I actually did say this, and I'm not the only one. This topic is nothing new. In fact, we have talked about this numerous times, which you can find on our websites to also refresh our memories. So on the topic of fear, we have editorials. In June 2003, mind you, 2003, editorial entitled, "There is no fear in love." And this was written by Norbert Link. And just one excerpt, he says, This we know, whatever God allows to happen to us in this life is for a purpose. Nothing happens to us unless God specifically allows it to happen. God is watching and observing us every second. He will not allow that we are tested beyond our capabilities to bear or endure the test. That's comparing 1 Corinthians 10:13. Why then should we be afraid of anything which might happen in our lives? God, our loving Father, is right there walking with us. He is surely capable to prevent calamities that might otherwise strike and affect us. In March of 2018, I also wrote an editorial entitled "No Need to Fear." In a small excerpt there, I say, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear in the worldly sense, but for our benefit. He has put the emotion of fear in our minds as a consequence of sin. We will be faced with fears, whether physical or spiritual, when terror strikes the earth in various ways. We will be in the middle of it. We will be tested. We will have to fight our fears over Satan's clever tactics. And we know that we can defeat him because God says we can, as God gives us the tools to arm ourselves. And those tools we can read about in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 11 and 12. The beginning of this year, January 2020, Norbert Link again wrote editorial entitled "Be Alert and Go Without Fear," where he says, "Considering this, let us go on with boldness, confidence, and faith in these troublesome days. Let us fulfill our individual and collective responsibilities while keeping our priorities in check. And let us watch and heed world events in the light of biblical prophecies, which should motivate us to draw closer to God. And this so much more as we see that the day is fast approaching." We have a Q&A series entitled "Should We Be Afraid of the Future?" Parts 1 to 3, also written by Norbert Link. And these were published in February and March of 2020, of this year, before things really started getting where they are now. And we have a lot of sermons on this topic. For those who think that now all of a sudden we're bringing this up, no. We've talked about this for a year, for many, many years. Back in 2010, Caleb Mitchell talked about fear. What type of fear should we have of God? Should we even fear him? The knowledge of how to properly obey God with the right type of fear can be found here. And then again in 2012, Caleb Mitchell with a sermon entitled "Fear Whom?" The summary is, what is fear? Fear happens when we have done something wrong and are expecting a penalty. So what does it mean to have fear of the Lord? When we have proper fear to God, we will not disobey God's laws because we will have such a great love for God. January 2013, Norbert Link's sermon, "Living Without Fear." What are you afraid of? Do you fear people or the future? Are you too fearful to make necessary decisions? Do you fear death? Are you afraid of God and his word? Do you fear that you might forsake God? That you might not make it into his kingdom? That you might stop repenting? Christ came to free us from fear. The sermon shows you how you can live without fear. 2013, we talked about this. And more so, how relevant is it today? 2013 may seem like a long time ago. It really isn't. Look where we are now. How quick time goes by. Eric Rank, also in 2013, with the sermon titled Fear and Wonderment. The fear of God is a unique experience, which ironically is nothing to fear. Learning how to cultivate the reverence that God requires of us increases our ability to understand Him and stand in awe of His amazing plan. A plan that is in action today and which will reach its fulfillment in the not-too-distant future. 2020 is where we're at now. It really isn't a not-too-distant future if you think about how quick time has gone by. He also spoke on fear and faith, Eric Rank that is, in 2016. Fear is common response to life circumstances. It is an emotion that often motivates people to take action. When fear motivates action that leads away from God, faith must replace that fear. By having faith and fearing God, we please Him, making worldly fear powerless against us. In September 2016, I gave a sermon entitled Fight Our Fears. And there are many different types of fear that people all over the world suffer from. Do we have a fear? And is there anything that we fear in particular? Do we fear God, and how do we fear Him? There are examples in the Bible of those who had fear. But how were they able to overcome it? Rene Messier, in 2003, gave a sermon, Fear and Humility. The need to fear God in a right and appropriate manner in a spirit of humility. Frank Bruno, in January 2019, Death Not to Be Feared. The world we live in encourages fear and a degree of hysteria with respect to human death. Movies create imagery around the ideas of both horrible evil capable of causing suffering and death, and the celebration of eternal existence, again, demonically inspired. Believers in the true living God, the Creator, indeed understand that everlasting life is possible through Jesus Christ. If we die prior to the return of Jesus Christ, we are asleep in Christ, much as Lazarus was prior to Jesus raising him up. We have this same opportunity if we believe and follow the commands of God, the Father, and His Son. And then again in September 2019, The Only Thing to Fear by Frank Bruno. Obviously, the world has become a much more dangerous place in recent years, and the blessings that we've enjoyed from God here in the United States and elsewhere will not endure in the face of outright disobedience of God's commands. As we move forward, we are admonished to be watchful of the signs and be spiritually prepared for the return of our Savior, Jesus Christ. We are also told clearly not to fear as prophecy unfolds, but to focus on our relationship with God for clarity and comfort. June 2019, Thilo Hunstein from Germany, who came visit over here, talked about how much fear and worry can we endure. And he talks about Mark 13:9 and verse 12. Watching out for yourselves, for they will deliver you up to councils, and you will be beaten in the synagogues. You will be brought before rulers and kings for my sake, for a testimony to them. Now brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. Are there really big problems? Do we have fears to overcome? What can you do about it? And Christ gives us the all-important answer. And just last week, by Eric Rank, future, fear, focus, and faith. And the Bible instructs us to seek the future kingdom of God. And we know that perilous times will lead up to that point, the future point in time. What can we do to endure the trials that we have yet to face? As you can see, we've talked about fear over the years and by all of us ministers, all unified together on this. This is something that's not new. But now we finally prepared each and every one of you to this point we're at now. This is where we are today. The things that we have been warning about, what the Bible has prophesied to happen, is right in front of our eyes. And now we have the choice to make whether we will obey God and his commands or whether we will give in to fear. We are always going to be faced with fear. But as it says in Revelation 2:26 and Matthew 10, verse 22, he who overcomes and keeps my works and endures until the end, it is he that will be saved.